Film has such an amazing look to it. In the 1860s, film photographers used their massive cameras to capture devastating images of Civil War battlefields. As time went on, inventors like George Méliès found ways of making these images move and come to life. Later, sound was added to these images and color, and on the technology went until we reach today, the digital age of what we still call filmmaking. The biggest way to get your videos to look like film is with color grading, and one of the main reasons that my videos have been looking way more like film recently is because I have shifted over to coloring completely in DaVinci Resolve. One of the biggest reasons that I have shifted my workflow into DaVinci Resolve is because of all the new tools that they have now built in to get your videos to look exactly like film. I'm talking about effects like halation, like bloom, like a gate wave, things like film grain that are really hard to do in softwares like Premiere Pro, for example. Not only do they give you all these new tools, but they also provide tools that we're used to seeing. Things like exposure, contrast, shadows, faded film looks, all the things that we're sort of used to seeing in a software like Premiere Pro, we can still have that in DaVinci Resolve in nice, easy sliders that are super easy to work with. So if you're a beginner, kind of like me, and you want to get started in DaVinci Resolve, then this effect is actually perfect for you because it brings over everything that you're used to working with, and it also includes all those nice film aesthetic features that I really love. I wanted to take this one step further though and actually see if it's possible using this one effect to color an entire video using, again, just one node and one effect. Let's jump into it and hopefully you'll learn something out of it. So the first thing that you're gonna notice is that there's already some built-in presets in this effect. So if you're looking for a 65mm or a 35mm or a popular 8mm type of look, then you can achieve that by just hitting a couple of buttons and then adjusting the sliders for whatever you need that effect to match your camera settings with. If you're at all familiar with DaVinci Resolve, then you'll know one of the first things that you'll have to do is convert your footage from whatever log or color profile that you're working with into the correct color space that the camera is actually supposed to be exported into. The main way you do that is by using a color space transform node. But what this effect does is actually build in that color space transform effect in this effect so that we don't have to use a whole bunch of nodes. We can just simply use this node, convert our footage into the color profile we want, and then begin tweaking the color. It's really awesome. The next thing we're gonna do is go to our color settings, and this is gonna be the area where we can make kind of our basic corrections. If you're familiar with Premiere Pro, this is the area where we can just simply change our exposure, our contrast, our shadows, all that stuff. This is gonna be a nice basic way to adjust everything. Outside of just the regular sort of contrast and exposure controls that we see, we also have things like skin bias, which helps maintain the accurate colors of skin tones so that we're not making things look like aliens or something like that. We definitely wanna stay away from that. There's also something called subtractive saturation, which if you're familiar with other editing softwares, there's always a saturation slider, but this is just a more fine-tuned way of controlling it. It doesn't necessarily take out all the color from everywhere all at once. It's sliding it and just mixing it together much more evenly, much more accurately to what we're used to seeing in film. There's also a slider called richness, which it kind of confused me at first, but basically it's a little bit different than saturation. While saturation refers to the vividness of colors, richness refers to the brightness of those colors in specific areas. So then when you're sliding that down, you're actually sliding the brightness of each individual color down and helping it mix together much more evenly. Films are typically much more punchy and are much more rich with their color. That's why we like the look of them so much. But if you adjust this carefully, you're able to create a nice, accurate filmic look and not like a cartoony, oversaturated look. Next, we have something called split toning, and what this does is enable certain colors to appear in both the highlights and the shadows so that we can adjust those to get that classic film look. What you typically see in film is that highlights appear much more orange and the shadows will appear much more blue. This is because of certain compounds that were used at film back in the old days, but we're gonna use that to our advantage because everyone knows that that blue and orange sort of look is that recognizable look that everyone's used to seeing in sort of these Hollywood films. And so if we adjust this just a little bit, we're able to get a look that looks a lot like what we're used to seeing in movies. Next we have halation, and this is an effect where the light actually penetrates the film and then creates somewhat of a halo effect around the highlights of an image. This can create a really nice dreamy effect, but don't overdo it because then it starts to look kind of weird, so make sure you're using this sparingly. Next up is bloom, and what this is going to do is it's really going to soften the highlights, especially in areas where there's bright light, like lights or maybe clouds in the sky. It's going to create a nice, soft appearance that's synonymous with the film look, similar to something like a mist filter that you can sort of grab off of Amazon or something. Although this one's kind of better because you can actually control and fine-tune the intensity of the bloom. Instead of with a mist filter, you're kind of just stuck with it. Next up is a lot of people's favorites, and that's the film grain. What film grain is basically just an effect that creates sort of the texture that we're used to seeing with films, because they weren't using these sharp 4K sensors or anything like that. They were using actual textured film, and it had some imperfections in it. What this effect enables you to do, however, is you can actually change and fine-tune the size and the speed of the grain so that it fits very naturally within the look of whatever story you're trying to tell. Again, don't overdo it because it's just going to become distracting. This is meant to complement your story, not be the sole focus of it. Next up is the film gate, and this one kind of confused me a bit at first, but basically it takes a little bit of understanding of history to really understand what's going on here. So back in the day, the old film cameras had something called a gate, which is basically something that exposed the sensor and the film to light. And so that gate moving up and down didn't move exactly perfectly. And so that created a bit of a flickering effect that we're now used to seeing in the old school films of the time. So what this effect does is give us the ability to control the intensity of the gate wave look. You can get it to look very sort of stuttery like it does in maybe something like an 8mm handheld film, or you can get it to look nice and smooth like some of the more high quality film cameras of the time, kind of like the ones that shot Lord of the Rings or something. Remember, always use it sparingly and always use it just a little bit to get it to look just psychologically almost to the eye like this is a film and not just some sort of digital video. Once you combine all these effects together, you can get something that looks pretty much like this. And I did color this whole video with just one node and using just the film look emulator. Now, in all honesty, would I actually use this effect in this way? Well, no, I wouldn't. I would use it integrated with an entire large coloring node tree and get it to look and behave the exact way that I wanted, built in with other effects. If you want to see that, make sure to subscribe and leave a comment because I'd love to know if you'd like to see my node tree. But this is more of just an example and an experiment to see how powerful this tool is. It's really powerful. You can do a lot with it. You can color an entire video with it if you want, especially if you're just starting out. Well, thank you everybody for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe because I'll be putting way more out like this. And again, these effects are not going to enhance your filmmaking. They are going to help create certain looks that you're trying to achieve, but at the end of the day, story is king. So always focus on the stories that you're trying to tell, and that is what's going to impact people in the long term. My name is CJ, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.